This is the I Read Comic Books podcast. I am your host, Mike Rappin. This week, I am joined by two spirits from faraway lands, Tia Vasilio.
Hello.
And René Rodriguez.
Bueno.
I mean, I know that I said you guys are from faraway lands, but literally you are so far away from me physically. It's almost the truth. Just hearing your voices on the internet is a great thing. But, you know, I'm here to talk to both of you about comic books. So let's just get right into it. Episode 263. I got to ask you some questions. How have you been? How have comic books been? Let's start with you, René.
I am the exact same as last time.
Okay, thank you.
I've been thinking about my response to that all week, and I was like, oh, what can I say? What can I say? I was like, you know what would be a good plug for the last episode that I was on? Was this like, I'm the exact same. So if you want to find out, just go back to that episode.
Okay.
No, I'm fine. Comic books are good. They're always good. I read some manga came out early this week. They came out on Friday instead of on Sunday.
Yeah.
Which we know, obviously, from because we both subscribe to Shonen Jump, which you guys can too. It's pretty cheap. Just go to Shonen Jump on your Google machine. This is not an ad, I swear to God. But
I wish that they were
Shonen
paying
Jump
us to
call
do an
us.
ad.
But should they?
Yeah.
Wink, wink. I wouldn't hate that. Anyways, the stuff I read a newer series, Build King Chapter 2 with story and art by Mitsutoshi Shimabukuro, and this is the creator of Toriko, which I don't know if either of you know what that series is.
I know the name.
It was a big series a couple of years ago. So it's about gourmet hunters. It's these people that go out into the vast, crazy lands of the world, and they hunt these crazy monsters and plants and things like that to get rare ingredients to make food. And so the whole world is basically revolves around, you know, gourmet food and gourmet hunting. And basically gourmet hunters try to make their ultimate meal, which is like 7 different courses and all that. And it ran for a good while. I actually haven't even finished Toriko. I'm like on chapter 325.
Right.
But that's not the series that I'm talking about. But the creator of Toriko has a new series called Build King, and it's kind of similar, but instead of gourmet hunters, they're builders. They're like carpenters and stuff. And
Okay.
The whole point is that there's all these terrible monsters that are trying to always destroy people, and so they're like, well, I'm going to build a house that can withstand getting destroyed by monsters and the elements themselves. So far is what it is. But it's weird. It's not as weird as Hard Boiled Cop and Dolphin, but you know, it's weird. But it's funny and I dig it. Only 2 chapters are out, but I'm already in it. I already like it. So I'm interested to see where it goes. And I also read Mission Yozakura Family Chapter 60 with a story and art by Hitsuji Gondaira and their team, all their assistants. But I feel like a lot of people are sleeping on this series, but it's really good. I really like it. It's a very classic gag manga turned battle manga, except that it's had a good mix of both since the very beginning. And the escalation in the series is very natural, and it's consistently funny as well as like action-packed. I would highly recommend it. And also it meets the plus 50 criteria, which is the criteria my best friend has, which is like, I don't want to hear about a new series. I'm not going to start reading a new series until it's got 50 chapters or more. It's got to be worth my time.
Ridiculous, René. Tell him that he's ridiculous.
I will. I'll tell him right after this. I'm sure he listens to the show, so I'm sure he'll get a huge kick.
All right. Well, you're ridiculous, René's best friend.
His name is Drew. Shout out to his actual name. I'm sure he's dying. Anyways, it meets the plus 50 criteria. So there you go. And that's what I read this week.
Gotcha. Well, Tia, what about you? What have you been up to? How's life been? What kind of comics you've been reading? All that.
Yeah. So I don't know if anyone else is experiencing this, but I just have zero attention span lately, like at all. I can pretty much only watch like trash reality TV because you don't have to pay attention to it. Reading has been a real challenge for me. And also, I fully expect there to be another lockdown order in LA like tomorrow. So I have been pretty careful about not going out anymore. So no comic shop. The comic shops were open here. You just had to wear a mask to go in, and they had, reduced occupancy. And I'm like, I'm just not going out for anything that's not essential. But I also can't look at screens any more than I absolutely am required to for my job, because I just am going to go insane. So no digital comics for me. So I looked into my library of books I have not read yet on my own personal bookshelves for something to read this week, which, when back in the before times when I worked in an office that got mailed comps by many large publishers, I would just take boxes of them home without even really looking at what was in there. And so, fortunately for me, my library on my own personal bookshelves is quite extensive and full of books I haven't read. So I settled on Stray Bullets, Sunshine and Roses, which of course is a spinoff of the acclaimed David Lapham series, Stray Bullets, which I have never read, because the only David Lapham thing I've ever read is his Crossed Psychopath run.
Oh my.
And it is without, and I've read all of Crossed. It is without a doubt the most disturbing Crossed story. And I have always maintained that if you ever encounter David Lapham, you should run away very fast, because I don't know what sort of disturbed individual could come up with that sort of thing. But everyone in comics assures me that he's lovely.
And you don't know, because you've run away from him every time you see him. And many of my friends whose opinions on such matters I trust have encouraged me to read Stray Bullets, and I'm like, okay, I don't have Stray Bullets, but I have Stray Bullets, Sunshine and Roses, because Stray Bullets was being independently published, and then Image Comics did like a reprint, like an omnibus, and then Lapham started putting out these like side stories. And I know what I do know about Stray Bullets is that it's very open-ended. Like, it's kind of episodic. There's this really big cast of characters. It's a crime noir, and you kind of weave in and out of the stories. So it's not the kind of story that you need to start at the beginning and have all the backstory, because there isn't any. And I thought, that's actually right at my level right now. I don't want to have to wrestle with a lot of backstory. I don't want to follow complicated storyline. And so I actually I really enjoyed Sunshine and Roses. It's like there's no exposition. You just jump right into a story. You have no idea who these people are or why they're murdering people or what's happening. But I have zero attention span, so that's kind of great. I just sort of meander through the story, and the moments are, they are compelling. They're well written. Like Lapham is the writer and illustrator, and so it's really well told. Visual storytelling is really well done. I like that it's just stark black and white artwork. It's a grid panel layout, so it's very straightforward, and I think that that's a nice balance to a story that is kind of free flowing and meandering, to give it some formal structure, even while there's no like narrative structure in the sense that you would look for to kind of like hang your understanding of what's going on. So if you are like me and you're kind of struggling to pay attention, you should check out Stray Bullets. I have to wonder, is this as insane as his Crossed run, or is it like a different type of story altogether?
I would say that it's not as disturbing at all, because just by the nature of Crossed, I think they ask you to just like be as gross as possible.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Although I will say his Crossed run is very character driven, if you could say that about
Okay.
Crossed. And I could see that here too, even though there's not a lot of backstory or exposition, like the characters relating to each other is really the meat of this. And
Gotcha.
I suspect if you like Tarantino, if you like stuff like, I don't know, Sons of Anarchy, I guess, or things like that, you know, there's just sort of like noir-y, crime, gritty stuff.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think Stray Bullets has been on my it's on my forever to read list just because I've heard so many good things about it. So I'm glad to hear that the spinoff might just be something to check out as like to get your toes wet before you dig into the huge omnibus.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think that's the beauty of it, really, is that you could kind of just pick up any point of Stray Bullets, and you don't necessarily have had. It's not like manga chapter 325, you know, like you won't be lost.
Gotcha.
That was the exact number. I'm very impressed. Like I know I said it only like a couple minutes ago, but still.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm impressed too, because my attention span is like that of a goldfish lately. So
well, for me, I have been nonstop busy. I don't know why I decided to just say yes to so many things. I've also somehow managed to just rope everybody that I know into doing a million things. So I apologize for that. I don't know what it is. But I was just recently on the I Freaking Love Comic Books live stream that they did this past weekend. So if you get a chance, I'll post a link to it in the show notes. But I was on a live stream talking about comics and comics news, which is really fun. Hoping to have either one or more of those guys come over onto our show and have them talk in the future, and then have maybe some of us go over onto their show. So I did that last night, and then I also recorded a mini-sode, and I also recorded another thing for my other podcast. Guys, I'm just very busy. I don't know why. I should have just say no to more things. But I did read some comic books this past week because I found that I had some free time, and I sat down and finally read The Magic Fish by Trung Le Nguyen, who, aka Trungles on the internet. This is this very beautiful original graphic novel about a child of immigrants trying to find a way to come out to his parents in speaking in Vietnamese. Meanwhile, the other half of the story follows his mother, who's very torn between her life and family in Vietnam, as well as this life that she's established now with her husband and child in America. She's basically someone who feels disconnected from both despite wanting to be involved in both, but obviously distance is a problem, and trying to raise a child is a problem, and all these different things. So it's a very beautiful book, in that the story kind of follows the son and mother as they're reading stories to each other, like old fairy tales to each other, like a Cinderella story or an Little Mermaid style story. So Trungles is allowed to do that style of art that they're known for, which is very beautiful, intricate dresses and princesses and castles and all this stuff that I think they're known for, but also tell this very grounded, personal, or very close to personal story. And all throughout the book, you see this evolution of characters, the mother and the son, as well as the princesses in the various stories. And at the end of the book, there's this very wonderful set of pages where each dress that the fairy tale characters wear and the settings that they're in, as well as the mother and the son, all the clothes and the choices that are made in terms of where things were, where the story takes place, were all chosen very intricately. And Trung gives a very beautiful breakdown of all the meanings behind a lot of things and what they meant for him, or them as a creator, because it's a very close parallel to, I think, their own life. It's a fucking magical book. I highly recommend everybody read it. Might be my favorite graphic novel that I've read this year. And yeah, I've been looking forward to this for a long time when it was announced, and it was like the perfect birthday present for myself because it came right around my birthday. And then I just sat on it for a month and a half because, you know, there's a million other comics to read, but I highly recommend it. The other book I want to talk about real quick is this graphic novel, or the first volume of this series called BL Metamorphosis. This is by Kaori Tsurani. I'm totally butchering this. Tsurutani. And this is part of a book club. This is a book that was picked for the book club that I run at work, and it's about a teenager and an old woman who become friends through a mutual like of the BL manga. And for those of you that don't know, BL manga is like boy love manga, and it's romance, can be very explicit depending on who and what you're reading. But the story is very wholesome. It's really bittersweet because you experience the perspective of a very elderly woman who's like 75 years old, and the trials that a person has to go through as someone at that age just to do things that I think a lot of people who are younger take for granted, like going up 2 sets of stairs, or things as simple as trying to cut open a large gourd. Like it's very hard to do when you're 75 years old living on your own. And so she meets this younger girl who works at a bookstore, and she doesn't recommend this BL book, but the woman stumbles upon this book and she goes, "Oh, this looks nice. I used to read manga when I was younger. Is this anything like a series that she lists off?" And the girl says, "Kind of. You might like it." And so she gives it to her, and it's a very nice little romance story. And the story kind of progresses as they become closer and closer friends, these 2 characters, and they start lending each other books, and at the end of the volume, they end up trying to go to something, and it's very wholesome. Like I said, it's a really great read. And I felt a lot of expression and emotion coming from these characters. And if you look at the art for this book, you can see that it's very simple in a lot of ways, but the expression and feeling you get from these characters is very genuine and very strong. I remember sitting down reading it, and I just looked over at Kelly, and I was just like, this book's going to make me cry, as this person is just having troubles just living a regular life because they're older, or because they're a teenager and they're so anxious about interacting with other people. So yeah, the story is wonderful. I highly recommend it. The problem is there's only 2 volumes out, and the 3rd one's coming out in December. So if you're looking to like binge a really wholesome, nice book, unfortunately there's only so much to read, but I really, really liked it. And just really quick before we go into comic picks, I do got to give my One Piece update, which Xander, you can go ahead and roll the clip.
Hey, Painter Girl, would you stop messing with me already?
But you were having such a good time. Wasn't it funny?
Well, yeah, it was kind of funny, but stop!
I am on 978. Maybe I'm a little bit further than that. No, I'm sorry. I'm on 980. I read a couple chapters this week. I'm really trying to take my time because 996 just came out. And if I blast through all the chapters, I'm going to be caught up, and I'm not going to know what to do with myself. So just having a little bit more slack to, keep reading, that's where I'm sitting at. So very close to chapter 1000, folks. I'm thinking it's going to happen before the end of this year, right? That sounds right, Renee?
I think so.
Okay, fingers crossed. Or maybe they're trying to time it with the new year.
I mean, it depends. Oda made a deal a couple of years ago where he's allowed to take more breaks because he's been at the top of Shonen Jump for 10 plus years, which is good. I'm glad that he gets he can now get more rest.
Yeah.
But I mean, it makes the schedule for One Piece, is who knows?
Yeah, I think they're aiming at like an every other week delivery schedule. So yeah, we'll see. But anyways, let's move on. Let's talk about comics that are coming out. Comics are dropping on November 25th, 2020. I want to know what you both are excited for. So let's start with you, Tia.
Well, I noticed that in between the 5th and forthcoming 6th arts of Monstress, there's going to be a little, I guess, side stories is my theme for the week. Yeah. Monstress Talk Stories #1 is coming out. This is the long-running and award-winning and frankly spectacular series by Sana Takeda and Marjorie Liu. And in Talk Stories, Kippa is going to tell you stories about her childhood, and everybody knows that Kippa is the best, so enjoy. I'm looking forward to that.
It's really cool to hear that a series like Monstress has the time and popularity to be able to do side stories between arcs, because I think that means that there is a serious investment by the readers for something like this, or at least Sana Takeda and Marjorie Liu believe so. But I think that given how many people have said, "Oh man, I've read Monstress," or "You haven't read Monstress yet," I think that that's definitely the truth. Yeah,
I think that it's a beautiful series, and the themes really resonate with people, and the characters are very, people get really attached to them. They're really dynamic and multifaceted, and it definitely deserves the acclaim that it's received.
Yeah. Another one of those books that I just need to sit down and read. I have all the volumes. I have no excuse. I just need to sit down and read them. So maybe before this series gets collected into trade, I'll actually sit down and read Monstress, because like you said, I've heard it's only beautiful and wonderful. René, what about you? What are you excited for this week?
I'm excited for My Hero Academia Chapter 292.
Oh my.
Which is a story and art by Kohei Horikoshi. And this arc has gone on for a very, very long time. And it feels like it's had like 6 different arcs inside of it.
Yeah.
It's gone on just multiple tangents, which it feels very reminiscent of some of the things that Oda has done in One Piece, like in the Alabasta arc and in just lots of arcs where it's like, hey, we're in the middle of all this crazy things. Let's also jump back into the history of this one character. Although in My Hero Academia, they're like, Horikoshi's doing it with, the main characters and the main villains, whereas Oda does it with like, hey, there's this random boss, but you should know everything about him, which is why he's dressed as a baby.
Or here's a side character that literally only matters for this one scene, but we're gonna do 5 chapters about his backstory.
Yeah, so it was a little bit like that, and it's like it's gone on for a really long time, and I was actually kind of like, I don't know, getting tired of it, and then it just kind of came back with the things that happened, and I'm trying not to give spoilers here, but the stuff going on.
290 had the big reveal at the end. 290,
which, I mean, though, if you've been reading the series, it was kind of out there, but
sure,
but it's finally coming into play, and even after this arc, like it's going to have drastic changes to the world of My Hero Academia, and that's what's really, really exciting for me, is that, like, a lot of the time mangas like have like, they're like, oh, this great big thing happened, and then like 2 chapters later they're like, but basically everything's the same. That happens a lot of the time in shonen. It's kind of different when you get into seinen stuff, but it looks like that they won't be able to do that with everything that's happened in this past arc. So I'm really excited to see what the future of My Hero Academia is going to be. And also Best Jeanist is literally the best Jeanist. So that's exciting.
Yes. I'm very excited for that chapter as well. But my pick for this week is Colonel Weird Cosmagog number 2. This is Jeff Lemire and Tyler Crook. All I can really say is let's get weird, but with the end of issue 1, where we saw a big culmination of things that came together based off of the weird kind of trippy traveling that we got the first person perspective of kind of for the first time in this whole Black Hammer world. I'm really excited to see what issue number 2 is going to be, and how much weirder it's going to get. I think Lemire's really leaning into the extremely crazy, indirect, abstract storytelling beats that you would see from other creators. And I think with Tyler Crook on art, there's a really cool potential. There's a lot of really cool potential here as to how weird and strange things can get. And yeah, for those that, if you haven't read Black Hammer, you should go read the main story and then pick up this book, because it's fantastic. And Tyler Crook's art is to die for. It's wonderful. The first issue was beautiful, and I can't wait for the second one. But let's we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to be talking about world building in comics. I'm very excited to get into it. We'll be back in just a second. For our show this week, we're kind of asking the question, is there something unique about world building in comics? And if the answer is yes, what exactly is it? What makes world building so unique about comics, or in comics? So, I mean, Tia, Renee, we've kind of been sitting on this for a little bit. I have a lot of just kind of high level thoughts, but I wanted to hear what you guys thought, I guess, initially when you saw this question.
I guess for me, I was thinking about in terms of production compared to other visual media like film.
Right.
If you want to build a world, or video games, I guess too, it takes a team of highly skilled professionals, months and years, to create a world that you can move through at will, or that your actors can move through and sort of in order for it to be a world build in an immersive sense, like you really, you really have to have a lot of those details actually created. And I think that one of the benefits of comic book art, you still have a team of highly skilled people, but it's a lot more self-contained. It's your limitations are really like your artist's time and abilities. And because you control the way that your characters move in the world and the way that the audience moves through the story, you can, only show them what you need to show them, for that story beat. And in fact, I think that having everything too fully fleshed out and detailed is in a lot of ways a hindrance to storytelling in comic books, because I think a lot that sometimes world builder creators get too wrapped up in the world building and they don't really do enough with the story that actually needs to take place in it. And so it's kind of like a Goldilocks situation, right? Where it's like not too hot, not too cold.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I thought you were talking about like the actual world of Goldilocks. Like, yeah, these bears have houses, but that's not really the point of the story.
No,
Sorry.
No, I think that that's absolutely the case. I think with comics, because I think we've all read comics where there's a lot of front loaded stuff, right? And you understand that the maybe the team is trying to put you in a position so that you understand a lot of the context of the world, and in some cases it can be super overwhelming, right? Like I think like Chew is an example of a book that I think of where they kind of front load you with a lot of information up front to establish the world. But I think what makes Chew unique is that like that upfront data dump isn't necessarily a complete hindrance, because it's just the tip of the iceberg as to what's going to come, right? We understand that like Tony Chu is a psychopath, and we understand that swine flu, or what was it, chicken flu, or whatever they called it,
avian flu
was a problem. Avian flu, thank you, was a problem. But then after that, what the actual story is about is totally not even completely related to that. And so you get to the end, and that's a whole other discussion. But yeah, I think that severe control is really crucial. I'm glad you brought that up. René, what are your thoughts? What were your first thoughts about this?
So my first thoughts about this was just kind of like the idea of the freedom that comic writers have, that because like in film, especially like when with things more towards Western audiences, there has to be this sort of sense of realism to every single story that you're telling. And I think with comic books, like, because I don't know, I feel like there's just a little bit more. They're like, they can be like, oh, we're going to put this man in a metal suit and it can move and do all these crazy things that we can't think of or couldn't think of at the time. Or there's a man that flies through space and he can just hold his breath from one end of the universe to the other. Or, there can be gourmet hunters that go and find giant bits of corn and heat it up by throwing it into the sun to make these gigantic pieces of popcorn.
What is that? What that comic book is about?
I mean, it's not what it's about, but that's actually one of the things in Toriko's menu of life. Is they climb these gigantic stalks of corn that are, because of the air pressure of how high they are up, there's something special about the corn, and then they heat it up, and it has to be like a certain heat. And it makes this fantastic piece of popcorn that is ridiculous, and that's his hors d'oeuvre, I think.
Okay.
But I mean, that's kind of the thing, though. Like, you can have a world of ninjas, or like this world where it's most of the world is flooded, so the Navy and pirates are a huge part of the world. Or there's there's all these kinds of things. There is a world where there's people that they can see the life of anything they eat.
Right. And I mean, and I think that's, that is something that is probably harder, or maybe it can be done in prose, maybe it can be done in film, but I think comics allows for that thing that I think we talk about a lot. I think, Tia, you've brought it up many times, of that pacing that comic creators get to have, and also people get to digest it at their own speed. So, when you're watching a film, things kind of happen at their own rate. Same with television. With prose, it can just be an info dump. It could be something that gets lost, but that combination of visual and prose telling, storytelling inside of a comic book allows for you to kind of process things in a very unique way, so that, you know, the art also enhances the text and vice versa, in order to establish a lot of things about a world on like a single page even. Which that's something that I'm constantly thinking about. This is that, like, it's not even just about the writing, it's about the visual side of the storytelling. And I think when you get creators that are very well adept at using that visual storytelling language in order to establish things, you know, not even quote unquote hiding things in the background, but using the shape of a page or using the beats of a page in order to deliver something that's happening to the reader, that can be a big thing or it can be a very small thing. But the fact that comic books can do that is, I think, very unique, because I think when you try to do it in a film, you have to do so much to establish things so as to not pull viewers out of the movie. And with prose, usually that just results in a lot of text, and sometimes a lot of text can just be super overwhelming. So I mean, comic books have that uniqueness about them that I think is very, very unique to just comic books. I mean, it kind of comes back to this idea that comic books may be the best medium to tell stories. I don't know.
I mean, I think that there's also something to do with the art, that like when you have something that's ridiculous, because, you know, when it's being drawn, you know, they sort of fit to the same world. Like even an adaptation like the Umbrella Academy, the comic is so much weirder and has a different pace altogether than the TV show. And like there's a lot of things that they don't put in the TV show from the comic because it's hard to translate into real life. Like the whole televator, or the fact that, you know, they only have one smart, you know, chimpanzee in the TV show, whereas in the comic they're just walking around like there's a police detective that's a chimpanzee. And you know, that's just part of the world. And in the comic it doesn't seem out of place at all, because it's drawn, they're all drawn and it fits. It's together. Whereas like if you had there's a whole budget thing, they have to, you know, make that digitally in the TV show. So there's a budget thing, but also it's like how much of that story are you just being aware that like, yeah, this chimpanzee just has to walk around with other actors, you know, digital person.
You know, and I think that the other thing too that is interesting about world building and comics and all of these things that we're talking about is the comic creator can make the choice to strip the world out of a moment, which would, I guess, technically be possible in other visual mediums like film, but it would be jarring and weird, and it would probably pull people out of the story. Whereas you can use the world for emphasis in its absence, as well as adding in more detail.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I think that's something that's kind of, I don't know if it's inherent or it's just something that's learned over time as a comic book reader, but it never feels truly out of place when something like that happens, right? Like if a character is suddenly in a white void thinking about something, or something dramatic happens and the world fades to black around them, like that doesn't seem out of place. Whereas in a movie, you would notice that. That'd be a moment where you'd go, "Oh, what's happening?" Or, you know, in a prose book, an empty page would be severe. And I think that's, you know, that makes those types of moments, you know, incredibly powerful, but also very unique in their not weirdness to the medium. Which I didn't even consider that.
Yeah, and to add on to that, there's also like, you know, thought bubbles that don't seem out of place, or like, you know, the narrative boxes, or even editor's notes sometimes can add to the story or the world building, you know, which you can't really have that. Like if you just had a producer's thoughts at the bottom of the screen of a movie or something, it would seem really out of place.
You'd have to buy the Blu-ray special edition to get that commentary in the background of the movie.
Yeah. And it's like it would be overlapping and whatnot, and you have it for like a split second. Whereas, like you said earlier, you know, if you're reading a comic, you have all the time in the world to take that in and to read that.
Yeah, I think that world building in film is about, I don't know, in art history, there's a term where it's like, is the scene that you're looking at a window? Like, are you meant to be looking into something real versus like an awareness that you're looking at a a creation or a fiction or a, you know what I mean, like an object. And I think that just by the nature of reading comics versus going to a film, world building in film really typically, I would say, is less self-conscious about it being an object, and it's usually just trying to create a window for you to look through. Whereas I think that comics are more conscious as a rule of being an object rather than a window.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with that. I think that there's definitely, I think creators a lot of times have a complete understanding of what they're delivering to people, and they understand that there's like, it's unlike film where we're literally getting a glimpse through a lens. Comics are that like a physical thing that, you know, whether it's digital or whatever, that like you can address and you can view in multiple ways without control. Like you don't have that timeline kind of like a film does. And I mean, you can skip around in a film, but I think with a comic, it's much easier for you to take things in a very unique to you way, right? So like the way that, you know, Tia, you read a page, or Renee reads a page, or I read a page may not be the same, but ultimately the point is to get the same meaning out of that page, no matter how you interpret it, right? That's I like that a lot. Maybe I missed your point there, Tia, but I think that
it's okay. It takes you to a new one. It's that it's a conversation.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the other thing I wanted to bring up though around this is the idea of these very strangely becoming common, because damn you Hickman, text dump pages. I don't think this is new, right? This is not a new thing. You know, people have been doing this for years. Specifically, let's look at something like Watchmen as an example, and other books that have done this in the past. But they're coming back, the resurgence of these just info dump pages in comics. Do either of you, I mean, maybe you've seen these, maybe you haven't, but the idea of like a prose page living inside of a comic book, does that take you out of the book? Does that like ruin kind of the uniqueness of comic books, or do you think that actually works?
I don't think it takes me out of the experience. But it doesn't think, I'm still aware that I'm reading a comic book and it's still part of the story. But I mean, sometimes like if it's just one panel that has a big thing, but if it's like 4 or 5 pages, then I'm just like, all right, dude, like crap or get off the pot, like let's go. I'm just really aware. And the thing is, like, there have been, you know, I've been reading comics for forever, and my brothers had comics or whatever, and I just found this out like fairly recently, that they basically just looked at the pictures and didn't actually read the comics because they were like, dude, there's too many words. So
yeah, but they got the story though, right? I think we you know, the ability for just the art to tell the story is something that's very unique to comics. I mean, I realize we're a little bit away from world building here, but like, you know, that does say something about the medium.
I think that like info dumping can be useful, but at the same time, like I read a ton of manga where the worlds are all vastly different, and they have to explain, you know, what the world is like. And some of them, you know, do big info dumps because the world is different. Like Fire Force does that, and Soul Eater did that. They're written by the same person. But then you have like series like D. Gray Man, where they give you little bit at a time throughout the chapters, and they're mainly trying to get your attention to keep you reading the series by doing action. And they do these little info dumps that are just like kind of like just, you know, the passerby phrase, you know, like, oh, well, the world did this, or like, you know, something happened like that. And I think that like I prefer that in comics, you know, and they also can show you a lot more like visually. Like a lot of manga will be like, well, this is basically how our world works, and they do like a picture A, B, and C type thing, and it's pretty brief. But you're like, oh, I get the deal. Like they did it in Naruto to explain chakra, which I think is the biggest info dump they had, other than up until the end, where they're like, let me tell you my master plan in, you know, 2 chapters.
Sure.
But I don't really like info dumps. I think that we should stay away from that, because then it's like, you know, a majority of the panel is just words.
Right.
And,
or pages. I mean,
yeah.
The reason I bring it up is because, you know, like it's becoming a thing that's becoming more regular. And I think that I don't know if it's bad or if it's good, because sometimes it makes me worry that if you do skip over those pages, maybe, or you skim them or you don't read the whole thing, are you missing critical details of a comic or a story? But then, there's also a question of like, the creators put this in there for a reason. So, I mean, it's maybe on you to actually sit back and read it. So, but yeah, I don't know. It's not something that's wholly unique to comics, right? Because I think you would see this in prose all the time, where you get diagrams and you get laid out pages and maps and stuff like that for you to take in. But it is something that I think I've seen more and more in comics, where you get a page or two of just prose or something. Like I read there's a book that I read from Vault that I can't remember the name of, that was very Lovecraftian, is very like that idea of these elder monsters and stuff, and there are whole pages of like journal entries and stuff, and if I hadn't read those, I don't think that I would have actually fully grasped the whole story. But it was a lot of prose to read, like 2 or 3 or 4 pages worth of prose to read. And it's weird, because those types of things really slow down my reading process and really make me sit back and think about the book, which I think is the intent. But it's something that feels like not comics. It feels like a thing that is injected into the book just because there's maybe not enough pages to do the story. And so I don't know. I think about it a lot just because X-Men does it. Like they were doing it almost every chapter in X of Swords, and I was just like, do I need to know the details of every single one of these swords, or is that something else? Because they were trying to establish a lot and all the different worlds and all this different stuff. So I don't know if you guys had any other thoughts on that. That's just me getting on my soapbox.
I mean, sometimes it's necessary. Like, could you imagine Drops of God without those vast bits of info dumping about wine? Like, it would change the story. And so, like, in series like that, it's necessary. And, like, in Death Note. But then the thing is, and this is the main gripe that I have with big info dumps, is when it really, when the text itself obscures the image. Like, it's like, oh, this is a really cool, like, page layout. And this is a amazing piece of art that they've done. But then they've also covered up 3/4 of it with this text. And I'm like, that image is really cool. Maybe you could have had that text either in the panel next to it or something. I don't know. I was like, that's the only time that it really bothers me. Like if they had done, when he, that full page spread of him decanting in Drops of God, one of the 100 times. But if that, like, while they were doing that, they're like, this is the whole thing, This is why decanting on his thing, but they don't. They have it just when it's like 2 people talking. They're like, what is he doing? But they have the full page spread of him doing, the decant. So like that one I'm fine with, something like that. But like when it's in the middle of my action shot, I'm like, bro.
Right. I mean, but it's kind of a thing of, if to bring it back again to world building, it's like, if these are the types of things that are crucial for the scene, like, is there a better way to basically get that information out to you? Or do you need to wait and have a scene where characters describe it? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, but
I'm really not a fan of it. I feel like you should always figure out a way to take out as much text as possible. Like I think that the text gets in the way.
Yeah. It's kind of goes back to that whole argument with, television, film, and as well as comic books, is you have a medium where you can show things, you should show instead of tell. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, comic books have, that this very, again, like this unique way of telling stories in general, and I think that kind of carries over to the unique way in which world building is done to make sure that, you as a reader become fully immersed in that world. And so when you pick up an issue of some comic, or you pick up a trade or an OGN, like, you should be able to just fall right into it without having to basically set yourself up for this, like, okay, now I need to read 2 pages of prose to get myself ready to read the comic, and that to me feels like a miss in terms of the story. And maybe the creators decided that they couldn't develop that in something, but I think that means that you maybe need to go back and rework your story a little bit.
Yeah, that makes me think of the introduction for Ultimate Muscle, which is a series, which is a manga series about like superhumans that did wrestling to solve big international or intergalactic skirmishes.
What?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
But,
Okay.
And so Ultimate Muscle is technically a follow-up series. So in the Japanese, the original series is called Kinnikuman, and then Ultimate Muscle is called Kinnikuman Nisei, which are the second. But so Ultimate Muscle, if you hadn't read the original series, they basically give you this brief overview, but it's not really bogged down with text. They take the first like 4 or 5 pages of the chapter to break it to you so that they're still showing you action, but also still showing you history. And it's not a big info dump. Like it's not like one big block of text. It's like 2 or 3 sentences every panel or something. So it feels really quick. It feels like you're reading it very quickly. And you're not just sitting there, reading 1 page for 5 minutes.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, yeah, I mean, I kind of brought this topic to the table with just some basic ideas, but yeah, I don't know if you guys have any final thoughts on world building or anything like that you want to get out before we maybe try to wrap up soon, or maybe we just have said that comic books have a very unique way of world building.
I mean, I honestly thought Tia was going to say something, so I was just like, I didn't want to like step over her.
I was waiting for a plane to pass by that was very loud.
Oh, sorry.
I think I would say one note I would just leave people with when it comes to world building and comics is to remember that just because you don't have to physically build the world doesn't mean that it's like quote unquote free to build. That the artist still puts a lot of time and effort into it, and especially if they have a really intricate world they have to draw, it's a lot on their bodies and also mentally to kind of juggle that constantly. So I think that a really good artist is one that not only can world build and tell a story within it, but also know when to be economical with those details.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, yeah, that's something that I mean, not to prolong the episode any, but like I was something I was thinking about this episode was that the amount of work that goes into creating a world just from the artist standpoint, right? To establish regularity of things in the background so that when you're looking at a book, it doesn't seem like the main characters in the story are the thing that defines the world. It's actually the presence of everything around it, right? A book like The Spire doesn't work unless the rest of the world is as bizarre as the story that's being experienced, right? And yeah, I think we definitely need to give our artists credit for it's doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and I don't want to say invisible, but a lot of the background heavy lifting to establish these worlds that I think we love and cherish. And I think you look at something like even a Marvel or DC book, and they establish that the things are happening in a quote unquote real world setting versus something like a super sci-fi book like Black Science or whatever, where there's a lot of things happening that are strange and sci-fi, and they are otherworldly in the background as well. So.
Right, and like
that's all credit to the artist, probably working in collaboration with the writer, but still they're doing a lot of the heavy lifting there.
Yeah, like all the little things, like in Invincible, when like all the blood like splatters off of the panels into the white of it. Like how
Sure.
detailed do they actually have to be to get all of those little spatters and whatnot that you have to do, and all the little things like you were saying in the background. And once again, I'm going to preach, to read Bakuman, which goes into all the things that creators of manga do, because a lot of them still, work with ink. They're not doing it on tablets. Not to say that is any like better or whatever, because there's still an insane amount of detail that has to go into making a series, whether you're doing it on paper or digitally. There's layers upon layers of stuff, but I would say that reading Bakuman really put emphasis into like background things that you don't notice, and it's crazy how much some minor detail can matter to a story.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, I guess, with that, I want to say thanks you guys for joining me for today's discussion. It's a big one. It's a big one. So I appreciate your thoughts on it. But, if you want, you can follow us all on Twitter. You can follow Tia at Portrait of Madam X, spelled the French way. You can follow René at Rodriguer29. You can follow me at Mike Rappin. And you can follow the show at IRCB Podcast on Twitter and Instagram. And we've got a YouTube out there. Please follow the YouTube.
This show and our many subscriber-only episodes are powered by fans like you on Patreon. You can join now at patreon.com/IRCB podcast. And if you haven't already, please rate and review our show. 5 stars would be lovely. You can rate us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Join us on Discord at ircbpodcast.com/Discord, and make sure to tell a friend or two about the show. Throw in some enemies as well, just get it out there.
Just spread the word.
Spread the word.
Infinity Shred is the best band in the universe. They do all of our music. Xander is a fun person to be around, fun person to talk to about video games and everything, but he also edits the show. I want to say thank you to him. Thank you again to Tia and Renee for being on this episode. Thank you to everybody who listens to the show. You are wonderful, fantastic human beings. And until next time, comics are good, and so are you.